As you learn about the narcissistic pattern, it's also wise to reflect on the much healthier alternatives. Now, below you're going to find a link to my new extensive course called Ready, Set, Connect. It addresses both the mindset and the skills involved in gratifying relationships, and I hope you'll find it to be quite therapeutic. I want to go into a difficult space here with you today, but in doing so, I also want to go into a space that will lead, I hope, to some serious healing for you. Now, first, before we go into all of that, I want you to acknowledge that whenever you're engaging with a strongly narcissistic person, it triggers all sorts of emotions, whether it's anger or fear or your defensiveness. You can have the emotion of total futility, exasperation, confusion, perplexion, disillusionment. Whenever somebody enters into your life and they more or less illustrate through the way that they act, I need to be in control over you. And I have no regard for you because you see it's all about me. And they have an entitled aspect about the way they think, which means they are more than happy to diminish you. You don't matter. It leads to all sorts of problematic situations, and underlying your emotional reactions to all of that, you want to just shout, quit it. Inside, there's a part of you that says, I know it's not supposed to be this way. And you have a strong sense of right versus wrong that guides you, and that's one of those qualities that can be both a blessing and a curse at the same time. I mean, the blessing is you have a moral compass. You have an ethical compass. The curse is it prompts you to hurt when other individuals don't share the same priorities as you. Now, when you look at life and you try to get a bit philosophical about all of this, common sense will say, I know psychological pain is inevitable. It's unavoidable. I get it. I realize that. But so many times when you have some of the severity of the difficulty that comes, a certain idealism still wants to kick in. I just wish that I could determine what the parameters of my pain ultimately is going to be. But then sometimes life, relative to that narcissist, comes back and says, too bad. It's just going to be the way it's going to be. And I know that when you hear that, it can just be cringeworthy. Many of you have had some really nasty, unnecessary circumstance come to you, and yet it's happened, and it's going to continue to happen. For example, you've been cut off from some very important primary relationships in your life. You may have had some financial disasters or some career adjustments that have happened because of the narcissist. You've been the object of derision. You've been on the receiving end of abusive behavior. You've been on the receiving end of false accusations and allegations. You've been bullied. And it's only natural in those times when, in fact, you do want to be assertive, and that's good. Or you do want to set your boundaries, and you do want to practice self-care. Sometimes you want to retreat. Sometimes you want to enlist support. Sometimes you just want to make some gut-level decisions that says, I'm not going to expose myself to this. And yet, in the end, it still hurts. And the narcissist still remains what they are, and the circumstances still remain undesirable. What are you going to do at a time like this? Now, I want to introduce to you a concept that's been around for quite some time, but perhaps you've thought about it, perhaps you've not. It's the concept that we refer to as radical acceptance. And when we talk about radical acceptance, it means that you come to terms with the things in life that are morally and ethically unacceptable. They're morally and ethically repugnant, knowing full well that the coming to terms may not be what you want it to be. Nonetheless, you're willing to accept what is. Now, when we talk about radical acceptance, we talk about accepting that there are some circumstances in your life that you're simply not going to be able to control. It's just simply true. Radical acceptance means that you acknowledge that there are some people in this world who call evil good. Or what's worse, they may call evil evil and they don't care. Radical acceptance means that you acknowledge that some people are masters at looking good, even though they can actually be quite deplorable. It also means that you acknowledge that your powers of persuasion may be diminished to the point of complete ineffectiveness, especially with people that could be positioned to make your life better. They don't care and they won't listen. It also means that you accept that love doesn't always win, at least in the short term. You can be as loving and kind and cooperative, and there's some people that will simply say, I'm not impressed. When we talk about radical acceptance, it means that you're open to the ugly facts, to accepting the ugly facts as they are without throwing a temper tantrum and without being consumed by bitterness and hate. That's a hard one. But at some point, you recognize I can allow those emotions to camp out on the inside of me, and then what I do is I lose my effectiveness. Radical acceptance says I don't want to go into that kind of space because of a narcissist presence in my life. Radical acceptance means that you drop the notion that life is supposed to be fair. And I know that that almost sounds cliche-ish. Well, who says life is supposed to be fair? I know that sounds cliche-ish to say that. And yet in radical acceptance, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to come to terms with that. I don't like it, but again, there it is. Likewise, radical acceptance means that you refuse to park in the victim's role, even though you have indeed been victimized. In other words, it's not going to be central to your identity, and that's hard and yet necessary. Radical acceptance means that you cease your efforts to plead or persuade or coerce. Not going to continue to do that. Radical acceptance also means that you choose not to accept another person's pronouncements of guilt and shame and devaluation on you, but you also know what your truth is about yourself, and your truth is you're a worthy individual. Worth is inherent in you. It's your birthright, and so we go into that space. But then also radical acceptance means that you understand and you receive the truth that some people simply will never mature, and yet it's those very people who seem to win. See, that's hard. And I go back and I say, there are all these emotions that are triggered by that narcissist, and you have all sorts of things that you'd like to discuss with that person, and you realize I may as well be banging my head against a brick wall. When you go into the space of radical acceptance, there are certain specific truths that you come to terms with. Number one, you recognize it's true. I have the circumstances in my life that I have. You drop the phrase, well, I just wish. Well, quit wishing. You have what you have. Also, you have the truth that says there are some people in my world that I will never approve of. I just can't. I will not agree with who they are. In addition, I don't think that those people are okay. And I don't believe that what they have done is okay. That's true, and you lock down on that. But then also it becomes true for you to acknowledge I'm limited. There are times when all of my best efforts will still fall short. It's also true that I'm incapable of having complete certainty in my life regarding what's going to happen next. Sometimes life is loose-ended. Sometimes life has quite a bit of mystery and uncertainty along with it. In addition, another truth is no one besides me is going to be in charge of my character. The more you stay tethered to someone with your pleading and your hoping and your arguing, thinking that maybe they'll change, then they wind up being having too much of an influence about what your character is. It's true. No one besides me has the ultimate say with respect to what my character and my integrity is. Not having what I want on the outside does not negate what I carry on the inside. That's true. And narcissists are very externally based people. They don't have good insight. They don't have good reflective thinking. You can be that kind of person. And basically, we're going to say with radical acceptance, you come to terms with the fact that says, all I have is my today. And today, I'm going to live as wisely as possible. So we're going to go back and say it's true. Pain exists. It's also true that sometimes narcissists can be so impossible that no matter how many times you plead your case, no matter how many times you say, I just wish, they need to quit it, it's simply not going to happen. So the rest of your emotional and intellectual energy needs to be spent by asking, what then is left of me? And I'm hoping that despite some of the lack of completion in your external world, you can still have a sense that says, I'm growing from the inside out. I absolutely refuse to allow that other person who's a very demented individual to have the final say with respect to who I am. That's something that's between me and myself and I. That person cannot have it. That's radical acceptance. It's hard because it means that there's a great deal of loose-endedness, and if you're the kind of person that wants to have everything tied down and in its place, it's going to be especially hard. And by the way, that's where my mind goes. I like to have things neat and in their place, but sometimes it's just not that way. I accept that. Now, I do hope that videos such as this can give you some good food for thought and personal reflection. Sometimes it's not as easy as you want, but there it is. If you've not already done so, I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button, and we'll keep more videos coming in your direction. By the way, did you notice Gus had a complete bingo today? He's all the way on the blanket. I think that may be the first time ever. I don't know. Anyway, Gus and I will keep more videos coming at you. Sometimes when you have issues that, like I'm talking about today, it could be very helpful if you had a therapist that could help you unpack all of this. I'm so pleased that I'm sponsored by the people at BetterHelp.com. We have a link provided below that would take you to their website, and there's a whole team of licensed professional therapists that could assist you. And if this is something that you feel the need to seek therapy with, then I would strongly encourage that you would do that. In addition, we have my therapeutic courses, and these are classes. They're video classes. They're very extensive, multiple videos, written material, and guided questions. Ready, Set, Connect, about having healthy connection skills. This is me, about establishing boundaries, free to be, finding yourself despite the controllers. We also have my podcast now. And if those of you who are in the podcast world, my books, and we have other resources below, my website, etc. Radical acceptance is hard. That's why we call it radical. It's taking your truth and applying it to some very difficult circumstances. But in the end, I really do believe, down to the core of my being, that the one thing that you have that nobody else can have is your integrity. And I hope that you can hold on to that despite the fact despite the presence of people who have no integrity. I'm hoping that in the midst of it all, you can find your sense of decency. And in the end, you can actually become a person of peace.